If you're struggling with writer's block, you're in luck because today I've got 7 tips that'll help you fight back. What's up, guys? My name's Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer, I'm the author of Bad Parts, and welcome to my writing channel. Today I want to discuss writer's block and how to overcome it. And this is a problem that affects a lot of you, and I know this because so many times people will reach out to me in the comment sections below, and they'll say things like, hey Brandon, I just started this new story, but I got maybe like 5 or 6 chapters into it, and then I just kind of gave up on it. Or they'll say things like, hey Brandon, I was trying to finish my novel, but I just hit this stretch where I just didn't know where to take it, and again, I just gave up on it. So a lot of you struggle with this where you hit like a blank page and you just don't know what to do from here on. This is what writer's block is. It's usually motivated by fear. You're afraid of where to take it next. So today I've got some tips that'll help you overcome it. First tip for overcoming writer's block, you need to tough it out. Now this is obvious advice, it's not going to blow anybody's mind, but if you are hitting like a blank page or you're hitting a section of your story where you just don't know where to take things, you need to accept that writing is a hard thing and you cannot just give up here. You have to force yourself to keep writing those sentences, put down one sentence after another until you push your story all the way to the very end. Some people like to think that, okay, just because technology has made our lives easier, that sitting down to a computer and writing a novel should be easy too, but it's not the case. You're playing on hard mode, you have to accept that, and you have to keep fighting to get to the end of your story. Tip number 2, kill your internet, and I mean just kill it. If you are sitting down to write and you go to your computer or your laptop or whatever device you use, make sure that as soon as you get on that device, you are disconnecting your internet or putting it in airplane mode or even taking your router and unplugging it and maybe even throwing it out the window. You do not need the internet as a temptation while you're writing, because sometimes when you're writing and you hit that blank page, you don't know what to do and where to take it. Sometimes when you hit that hard section of the story, the temptation is to just do something easy like go on Facebook or check your emails or go on eBay or look at old Jags highlights from the 90s, things like that. You don't want to be doing that stuff. Tip number 3, set a word count goal before you write. Now, I've talked about this on the channel before, so I'm not going to beat it to death here, but it helps if you set a goal for yourself in terms of word count. I don't care if it's 500 words or 1,000 words or 2,000 words, whatever it is. If you are sitting down to write, set a goal of some sort or another. You don't have to stop at that goal. If you set 1,000 words and you want to go cranking off into 2,000 or 3,000, by all means, go for it. But set a limit that you will at least hit and make sure that you consistently hit this. Now, the thing is, if you are writing along and let's say you want to hit that 1,000-word limit and then you get stuck around 700 words and then you say to yourself, maybe I should just quit for the day, but no, I have to hit that goal of 1,000 words. And what you can do, those last 300 words, they don't have to be special. You just have to put them down there. Just try moving that story forward until you hit that word count limit. Sometimes when you do this, I mean, it's not always going to be pretty, but sometimes when you do this, those last 300 words will start taking you in the right direction. Tip number 4, if you're stuck, jump to another part of the story. Now this works especially well if you're writing the early sections of the story and everything's cruising along, you got your character introductions, you're introducing the conflict and the world building and so on and so on, and then maybe after like 5-6 chapters you hit a wall, you don't know where to really take things, and you're asking yourself, well geez, how do I push this story forward? But in your mind you know that toward the middle of the story you have this great sword fight planned between the hero and the villain, and you know how that scene's going to play out. Now if you're stuck getting from the beginning to that sword fight in the middle, ask yourself, well, what if I just jump to that scene that I know I want to write? And sometimes when you do that, the rest of the story will become clear. When you write that middle story, that middle scene, you will start seeing things within this story world that you didn't think of at first. And you'll ask yourself things like, okay, how do I need to set up this sword fight? And that's very important because sometimes you might have a situation where you have these two characters fighting and they're swinging their swords and whatnot, and you don't have your main character obtaining a sword in those first few chapters that you wrote. So then all of a sudden you know that, okay, I need to include a chapter where my character buys a sword or earns one or whatever it is. And then you might also say to yourself, well, what about that villain he's fighting against? I have to introduce that villain somewhere, so I'll introduce that villain in those chapters that I'm uncomfortable with, I'm unsure about. Tip number 5, go back to a recent turning point in your story and change the outcome of that scene. So here's what I mean by this. Let's say we're writing a story, we have two characters who are running away from a monster, and this is one of your most recent scenes. And they escape unscathed, nobody gets hurt, everybody's clean, it's all good. and you start writing the following scene and you don't know where to really take it because, everything worked out well and there's no conflict going on. So what you can do, I mean, you can force yourself to, just come up with conflict out of there, or you can go back to that scene you just wrote. You can go back to the scene where the monster's chasing them and change the outcome of this scene. So instead of these two characters just getting away unscathed, maybe the monster captures one of them, or injures one of them, or even kills one of them. And then in the following scene, you have to react to that tragedy. You have to find a way for the characters to overcome that situation. If one of them got injured, the other has to help the injured one along, and maybe they're moving along slowly and they have to hide from the monster, or maybe they have to treat a wound or something like that. And when you do something like this, when you have a scene end in tragedy like that, you can have a lot of conflict in the following scene. We have to patch up wounds, we have to escape, we have to, find a way to fight back, things like that. Tip number 6, introduce a random attacker. And this might sound like reckless advice because I'm telling you to just introduce some random character into your story. But sometimes when you're writing your story and you find that the tension is kind of at a lull, what you can do is just introduce some sort of threat from the outside. It doesn't even need to be something you planned. You can just introduce some random person who knocks on the door and shows up with a gun. And that can send your story in a brand new direction, and it can instantly inject conflict in this story. Now, if you have like a bunch of characters sitting around and someone does show up at the door and maybe this character shoots one of your supporting characters, then all of a sudden your characters have a reason to act and go after that shooter and find out who sent the shooter, or what was their motive, or things like that. And then your characters are playing detective and they're interrogating. There's a lot of things going on all of a sudden, and it's exciting instead of just having people sit around. And then my final tip is one that you shouldn't be abusing. This is something you should only use as a last resort. And tip number 7 is that you should start a new story. Now, sometimes when you're writing a story, you need to just, force your way through it. You need to find a way to just complete that story. But there are also times where you realize that, okay, maybe this idea for a story was great, but I'm not at the level I need to be in order to write it. And that's okay. That's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, Stephen King, his 2009 book Under the Dome, which eventually got made into a TV series, this was a book that he tried writing back in the 70s and 80s, but he admits that he walked away from it with his tail between his legs. It was just something that was above his skill level at the time. And sometimes when we are writing these stories, we have these grand ideas, but we don't have the skill set for bringing them into life. And we need to gain those skills over time. And if you just beat yourself to death trying to write the story that you're not ready for, you will actually set yourself back. So I hope this helps. Question of the day: what is your favorite method for overcoming writer's block? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the channel, please pick up a copy of Bad Parts if you haven't already. Also, be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. And as always, remember to keep on writing.